Hi, my name is Nicola and I'm one of the co-founding directors of an organisation called Flourish Together. We support social entrepreneurs and we reinvest our profits in supporting women to create the change they see needed in communities. And I am running this workshop for any social entrepreneurs out there, in particular for Unlimited Award winners in Sale West and for anybody else who's catching up on demand, so to speak. This session is all about communicating social impact and value. And we're going to cover a range of things. So, first of all, the overarching picture for the session is, what is social value, who cares, and why bother? Lots of people talk about this term. It's got a bit of a mystique around it. We're going to unpack what it means and help people get some simple methods and ideas on how to get started. And if you're already doing some of this stuff, develop some thinking on how to improve on what you're doing and basically show you what it looks like when it's done well, or hopefully. So, what is it? Social value is the relative importance of changes that occur to stakeholders as a result of an activity. What on earth does that mean? That the Social Return on Investment Network put this statement out there as a kind of summary of what this is, as a definition. It's basically that, what changes as a result of what it is you do, otherwise known as theory of change. You might have heard that kind of set of buzzwords bandied about. It's basically what it is you're going to measure to help you understand how the people that you work with benefit from what you do and what's changed for them. What's changed for them personally, what's changed in their lives, what's changed for the way they act, behave, now choose to make decisions differently or get involved with things differently as a result of what it is you've exposed them to. That is what social value is, and there's various ways to measure it and there's various ways to account for it. Or there's various tools out there at least to help you work that out. Social accounting. So the value bit is, what's changed and what's the cost or what's the value that's been attached to this change that's happening in people's lives. We'll come back to set examples of this shortly. Accounting is the method that you use to figure this out. So on the last slide, it talked about stakeholders. Stakeholders are anybody who's got a vested interest in what it is you do. So you might run a social enterprise, you might have a community project, you might run an organisation, you might run a campaign. And there are people around and about you. There might be champions, supporters, part of your team. There might be people who are benefiting from the activities that you're putting on. There might be the families of the people who benefit, or the carers, or the wider business and/or a business community and/or rest of the world who benefit from the fact that you exist and that your organisation exists and what it does is taking place, and they're stakeholders. They've got a vested interest in making sure that you continue to operate, that you succeed, and that you keep generating the impact and creating the value that you do. And social accounting is measuring what change is happening for these stakeholders, these beneficiaries and wider interested parties. It's helping you record and gain the evidence of what is happening. And it's helping you report and communicate this to different people, different audiences of the reason you put this stuff together or you try. It might be for your funders. It might be an initial start point as to why you would record and report and evaluate what you do because you're kind of told to, or you feel like you should, or they expect a report or something that shows that you spent your money and you delivered your results in accordance with what they said. It might be as a result of somebody contracting or investing in what you do. It might be, you're trying to improve your marketing materials or your wider communication so you get more people buying into or becoming aware of what you do, and you've got better ways of telling them how and why they should be interested. So there's lots of reasons and lots of audiences as to why you might bother. As it says here, there's currently an awful lot of impact metrics, as they're called, being used all around the world to try and measure the value of stuff. There's the carbon emission metrics, how many tons of CO2 or have been saved from going into the atmosphere, how many jobs have you created. So there's how much you're saving the public purse if you're delivering health, well-being, social care, educational services, in addition to what the government are already paying for, or alongside. There's even things called the happiness index and other things that people are trying to quantify and calculate what things cost us. But ultimately, one of the reasons for doing this is, so that you can sleep at night and you've done a good job. It's so that you can communicate better with your staff team and your wider stakeholders, what the impact of what you're doing, and when it's working well, brilliant, stick it on your marketing material, stick it in your evaluation reports. Where it's working not so well, you review and you improve and you design better services or activities or products as a result. So it's all part of learning, and it's all part of understanding how to do what you do better, but for the purposes of social value measurement, how you are saving the public purse or wider kind of funders and investors, saving them money on what they would otherwise be spending, because there's that additional elements what you do that creates leverage and creates additional legacy and creates additional impact. Social accounts are a particular way of putting down your social value evidence and measurement and impact. Sometimes they're called sustainability reports, CSR reports, environmental reports, annual reports. I'd say these are all slightly different, in my opinion. They've all got slightly different angles, slightly different audience, or slightly different format, but invariably they're telling people, what you sought to deliver, what you achieved, what changed as a result, and how that's added value to the community, the environment, or something else. So people often get confused by the language in this, which isn't surprising. But when you account for social value, there's some different building blocks to pull this information together. And you might have heard of this language before: outputs, outcomes, impact. That's often where the journey stops with what people understand. And value is an additional bit that we're going to really look at today. So outputs it's what has happened as a result of this person, this stakeholder, or this individual's journey. So we're going to talk about Jenny here. And so in terms of an output, Jenny turned up. Jenny was a bum on a seat. Tick. There you go. You've got your output. Jenny turned up. Boom. That's outputs. Doesn't tell you much at all. It just tells you she turned up and she was there. And for some funders or for some organisations, that's enough. Often in the funding world, in the social value world, for people seeking to create change, improvements, that's not enough. And so you then move on to outcomes. So what happened? What happened as a result of Jenny turning up? Jenny's got improved confidence. Jenny might have improved her confidence. She might have gained some new skills. She might have spent some money in the shop around the corner. She might have built the confidence to leave her children at home for the first time, or not at home, but or at school, or leave them with a childminder for the first time. So what's the ripple effect that's starting to form as a result of Jenny turning up for this course? And in this case, Jenny's improved her confidence, and that will do for an outcome, mark 1. So Jenny's done this course, she's built her confidence, and she's perhaps done some of these other things I just said. So what? What happened next? What's the real impact? What is Jenny now doing differently as a result of this improved confidence? And the pinnacle, Jenny got a job. Jenny might have done some volunteering. Jenny might have turned up once and never gone back again, but has been inspired to think about the next course she might want to do, or a business idea that she'd been thinking about for a while is now fizzing away in her mind, or there's all sorts of other things that can happen as Jenny might have bumped into a guy on the course and decided to go for a drink, and she's found the love of her life. You know, I've worked with people before now where, you know, they've been that isolated for that long that actually making friendships and meeting new people, you know, can be quite a significant outcome, you know, for people. It's a spectrum of, you know, what can happen as a result of people engaging in your services, your activities, or buying your products, and that kind of thing. So downloading your app, whatever it might be. So in this case, Jenny's got a job. So that has, you know, all sorts of ripple effects and all sorts of benefits in different ways. And so it's worth you having a think about this from your point of view and your context and your organisation. You know, with the work that you do, what happens when people turn up? You know, how many people turn up? Who turns up? How diverse are these people that turn up? What are their expectations, and do you deliver them? You know, what changes for them? You know, what changes in their behaviour? What changes in their attitude? What changes in what they then do the next day, the next week, the next year? You know, what happens for them, and where do they go next? What's the ripple effect? And then, you know, beyond that, as this ripple effect moves further away from you, it's, you know, almost kind of beyond your control and beyond your eye line, unless you choose to invest in finding out what happens next. You know, what they're doing differently, what happens for them, what happens for their families, what happens in their community, what happens in their wider social circles, their environment, as a result of them having engaged with what it is you do. And so what? Who values this? What is the value of all of this, and who cares, and who's interested? And that's, you know, have a think about that. Have a think about what it is you do, those activities, what they lead to. Think about some of the characters that have been through your doors. You know, you can map them out as individuals, you can map them out as a cohort, as a group, as a team of people. But what goes on for the people that you work with? Map it out, and this value that gets created then gets distilled into different types of value to make it meaningful, because different people value things in different ways. So, accounting for social value. As you saw in the last slide, there's direct, indirect, and wider benefits to what you might do. So in this case, Jenny, she's been on this course, she's developed self-confidence, she's got a job, she's now got much more self-worth, she's got more, you know, from this job, she's now got more money available. She can pay off her debts, which were a big stress to her, causing her potential mental health issues. I mean, she was struggling, feeling, you know, like she couldn't, you know, take care of her kids, manage her household, whatever it might be. And she can now afford to feed a family and, you know, have a little bit on the side and think about the future in a way that she perhaps hadn't done before. Indirect benefits, the family are benefiting from her increased health and well-being, you know, less stress, more calm, more disposable income, or you know, disposable income. So she can do, she's got more choices, she's got a bit more freedom around what she plans to do and what she can do for children and her family and anyone else. The employer that she's now working with, you know, has got this great new employee, trained up, confident, ready to go, and they're benefiting from her skills and her character and her being part of their team. Local shops, you know, another thing, you know, if you haven't got it, you can't spend it. And in the current climate, you know, and forevermore in a day, you know, cash is king to some degree. And you know, if Jenny's now got more cash, she's an additional person to be able to contribute in the local economy, spending money, buying stuff, and going out to restaurants in theory, buying takeaway at least, and getting a, you know, a food shop dropped off or whatever it might be, and thinking about what she might want to do in the future. And wider than that, you clearly, you know, government are benefiting. You know, this gets back to the public purse bit and the statutory world of savings and what it's saving the public purse. Government's benefiting from savings and welfare benefits, you know, and increased tax payments from her through her employer. The school that the children are going to benefiting because, you know, the kids are sort of happier, healthier, more relaxed. Potentially, you know, she might be paying, you know, for nursery or for additional wraparound care or whatever. So there's additional investment there. And the local economy is benefiting because, you know, more money is being spent, as we said. So it's worth having a think. You know, you might just, you know, see these people who turn up and get on your course, come to your activities, come to your centre, eat at your social enterprise cafe, whatever it might be, or, you know, your people that you work with. But what next? What else is happening for them as a result of being part of what you do and what's happening? You know, how are those that directly come into contact with you benefiting? Who's benefiting as a result of them benefiting? And ultimately within the wider environment, locally, regionally, nationally, who's benefiting from all of this? And what could you put a financial price on that? Is ultimately what it comes down to. And you'll see some examples here around, you know, how people, you know, individuals can benefit, the wider family, community, suppliers, local economy benefit. And then as you get broader, you get wider out, you know, GPs, hospitals, crime prevention and justice services, drug rehabilitation, youth offending institutes and other, you know, councils and other things benefit as a result of what you are potentially doing, if you choose to see that far. So that's it in a nutshell. We're going to move on to think about, you know, how social enterprises create value. But first, we're going to just remind ourselves on why bother. So there's various reasons why to bother. There was this thing called the Social Value Act that came out in 2012. In theory, and to some degree, you know, that's made an impact around councils' preferences of who they might choose to work with, who they might choose to buy services from. There's still a long way to go, I would say, in terms of having a real dent, but certain councils around the country take the Social Value Act seriously and they seek to source and procure and purchase more ethically, socially and locally as a result of some of that. The EU, although we're on our way out of there, you know, have certain legislation around this stuff, and they again wanting to source and purchase and invest the funds in organisations that can demonstrate and create and report on social value. There's a whole social impact investment world that's evolved, I'd say, over the last decade or so, where as much as you've got banks and you've got, you know, Dragon's Den style sort of angel investors, there's a new breed, so we're led to believe, of impact investors who've got a slightly more social and ethical stance on who they choose to invest in, who they choose to support, the difference that they want to make with their investments. And so unless you can demonstrate you're going to make a difference, you're going to create a social return, you're going to change the world with their money, they won't back you. And this leads on to things like, you know, ethical consumerism, where, you know, the wider general consensus within the public now, be it around environmentalism, climate change, COVID, making us all realise that actually there's an awful lot going on in communities and awful lot that needs to go on locally. And by investing local, buy social, all of these initiatives to get people to buy more ethically are starting to bite and take some get some traction in theory. Corporate social responsibility has been around for a long time. Some people might see it as lip service, and in some cases it is, but again, with a COVID slant and with the right organisations and with organisations that have spent some time thinking about purposeful corporate social responsibility, evidence basing the impact and the value rather than just the kind of marketing piece is really important. There's ways of writing social contracts to communicate what it is you do. I've always said, you know, it's not a million miles away from academic research. It can be, but you know, there are some synergies. You know, there's a lot of ethos and a lot of kudos and a lot of time and money spent in academic research up and down the land across the many universities that we have. And that's slightly different research to social value research, but the two have benefits in demonstrating impact of what happens and evidence of what's going on, so that people can learn and evolve and do better and improve things, and be aware, more importantly, be aware of what is happening and what is changing as a result of whatever societal differences, shifts in trends, or the way things are being invested. And ultimately, as an organisation, as a business, social enterprise, community business, whatever it is you are, it's creating this evidence base of what it is you do, and it's creating this evidence base of what you might save the public purse to be able to demonstrate your track record, demonstrate a strategic case for why you should be funded, commissioned, bought from, worked with. There's lots of reasons. I don't know whether any of those, jump out to you as a good enough reason, but certainly as a social enterprise, it's a key part of how you operate, and putting some of these things in place soon help you secure funding in a way that you couldn't before, secure contracts and commissions in a way you couldn't before, and increases your quality of your marketing and the stories that you tell, and engage your community and your audience in what it is you do, if you know how to gather this information. So this is just a quick, you can go away and Google those at your leisure. Sorry if you're watching this on catch up and you've not got the links directly, you'll have to type those in. But there's social value commissioning is becoming a big business, or it's becoming an evolving concern, and different political, with a small p, factions are interested in this. And you might hear of the SRGs, which aren't on here, so or SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals is a big United Nations initiative. There's ERGs, there's all these daft acronyms, but ultimately people, the corporate world and the public sector world, are waking up to the fact that life's about more than money, and who you choose to work with, and what you choose to do with your time, and how you spend your resources are precious things. And not only are they precious, and they're ever decreasing currently in the current climate, with a certain level of uncertainty, that the more that you can get more bang for your buck, so to speak, the more that you can get social return as well as financial return, it's a win-win situation, and that's what this is really talking about. So there's different methods of doing this stuff, and there's different methods of creating or measuring social value, so that you can evidence-base things in different ways. There's something called social return on investment, which kind of chases the money. Social return on investment looks with a fine-tooth comb at what you're saving the public purse, and it really looks at the sort of financial return on what's going on, so that you can clearly say, for every pound invested by the public sector, or for every pound invested by this particular fund or this particular investor, we create X worth of pounds as a result. And at first glance, what does that mean really? And when I've looked at various different businesses and different organisations, and you could look at any other thing and go, oh, that sounds good. But from what I've come to learn with the different social enterprises that I've come to work with over the years, over the last 20 years, typically, and don't quote me on this, but any additionality is additionality. If whether you're creating £2, £3, £4 additional value for every pound spent, is more than it otherwise would have been. But lots of different kinds of organisations could potentially say that they're creating that. They're creating jobs, or they're creating interest, or they're creating a good atmosphere. But ultimately, we're looking at what else, and particularly around the public sector, contracts, commissions, funds, and through the current climate where survival in many cases is key. How you're really supporting those most in need and the most vulnerable and the most at risk of coming into contact with, criminal justice systems or mental health systems or unemployment initiatives, social services, and the more you can demonstrate that you're creating value that's saving the public purse in those areas, the more likely you are to secure the contracts. So SROI is really about understanding the financial value of what you're saving the public purse. This LM3 is all about what's going on in that local area. So you might be running something that's a health and wellbeing business or an environmental business or working with ex-offenders across the country. But LM3 is much more about what's happening in your borough, your region, your area. So that you can show, they talk about the leaky bucket, and the New Economics Foundation have done a lot of work around trying to people understand how to keep money in a local area to stop the money leaking out so that your investments can capacity build, regenerate, and keep local areas buoyant, thriving, resilient, whatever the words are. LM3 is a way of tracking how the money gets spent in and around the geography that you're in. Well-being and measuring well-being is a big part of lots of social enterprises. There's different methods for doing this. We talk about outcome stars here. There's also WMWebs, which is a recognised mental health tool looking at how you measure well-being and how somebody's mental health is improving. It's a recognised tool that's used by quite a lot of organisations, but it's quite a light touch way for any social enterprise to start measuring value, even if you're not quite ready for some of the other methods just yet. That helps you demonstrate your track record, what's changing and improving and happening for people as a result of what you do. There's also many different kinds of sector-led benchmarking social value measurement tools. And HACT is a kind of housing association one, which if you're working with housing associations or if what you're doing is working with tenants and residents of housing associations, or you want to have a look at that toolkit to see elements of it that you could apply to what you're doing, something to look up. Ultimately, when I work with people, it's all about a blended approach, because most people aren't ready for one or all of these things. And it's kind of horses for courses. You're only going to do this if it's relevant for you. You've got the capacity to do it, you've got the budget to do it, and you get what it is that you're trying to achieve, and the people that you work with understand what it is you're going to tell them at the end. And so I'm saying keep it simple, keep it affordable, and ultimately what you're working towards, and this is a bit of terminology, but is developing your own set of key value indicators. And what that means is you could measure anything and everything. You could evaluate all the things that you do, but why would you do that? You'd spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and you create all this data and think, oh God, how am I going to analyze all this? And what is it telling me? And who cares? And who wants to know? And that's the point. Who cares and who wants to know? You find out from your stakeholders, like we mentioned before, those people who've got a vested interest in what you do. Ask them what they value about what you do. And we'll come to this shortly, but if you measure what people value about what you do, you cut to the chase, you focus in, and you save an awful lot of time on all of the other bumf that you could, like tick boxes and questionnaires and surveys and ask questions about. But what would it tell you, and what would that evidence achieve? So the point really is keep it simple, keep it affordable, and measure what people are interested in, what they value, because that's where the information needs to go. You need to report to who's interested in what, rather than anything and everything, what you think they're interested in. So it'd be interesting, have a little think. We're going to look at this a bit more, but just to have a bit of a reflect on, how are you currently measuring social value or impact, or evaluating what you do? How is it currently happening for you? What's being captured? What are the methods that you use to gather this information? What methods do you use? Who do you involve? And are you doing a good enough job? Are you finding out what you need to know? Do you get why you're doing what you're doing and who you're doing it for? And have you got clear ways of communicating this information once you've got it, clear ways of using this information. Because invariably, when it's done well, as we'll find out shortly, you know, this data gets used for writing more slick funding bids with much more clear and evidence-based content, evidence-based data that tells the funder exactly what's going on, exactly that you know your community well, and you're listening to their needs and you're responding to their needs, and their lives are changing as a result, so they need to invest in you. Or you are talking to these guys and thinking about how better to market to new people. You know, you might have run some really great courses and you're looking to sell more stuff, courses, programs, bags, shoes, coffees, whatever it is, to a wider audience. And you need to tell that story and get those impact case studies to report and share and put in your marketing, put on your website. So, you know, that's another audience for finding this stuff out. So, you know, it could be bids and proposals, it could be marketing, and it could be, you know, around gathering additional market intelligence to check what's going on, how you compare with other organisations, and how you refine and improve and innovate in new ways. So there's different benefits you can get from when this is done well. Right, I'm going to run through a few case studies here just to see if this makes sense. So we've got 4 examples here, all different kinds of legal structures. We've got Down Syndrome, which is an organisation based in Lancashire, and they're a charity, they're company limited by guarantee. You've got In Place of War, or a Manchester-based organisation, but they work globally, and they're a charity, company limited by guarantee. I think Shiverpool were a company limited by shares, and they work out of Liverpool. They're an organisation that does sort of heritage tours and helps people in creative and performing arts get jobs and get earning alongside their studies, and tell the great tales and historical tales of Liverpool and the great architecture there. And you've got Met Munch, a community interest company limited by guarantee. They're an organisation that's linked to Manchester Met University, headed up or initially founded by a nutrition lecturer there, senior nutrition lecturer, who has then worked with the students to create this company that brings a curriculum to life and does all sorts of other exciting things around the edges. So in each of these cases, there are different customers, beneficiaries and indirect beneficiaries, and we'll just have a quick look at these. So Down Syndrome, you know, it's delivering training and learning to people, development opportunities, it's creating employability and skills opportunities, and it runs events and performances, sells tickets, and it also does, because they're working with people with various disabilities and other experiences and different people with lived experience, they run a whole range of diversity and inclusion workshops. So those are the sorts of things that they run. And off of the back of that, different customers and beneficiaries and indirect beneficiaries benefit as a result. So in terms of, you know, some of the value that comes out, there are, you know, dancers and these people who train up in various courses and programs. There are people, general public, buying, you know, tickets to attend events and to attend conferences or training. Different educational and learning commissioners and health commissioners can potentially invest in this organisation to run initiatives, research programs that helps them better understand people with different forms of disability, but also different ways that people from all walks of life can operate and run all sorts of inclusive activities. And then there's wider, small, medium, you know, local businesses basically, and corporates who might buy in some of those workshops or buy tickets for events. So they're directly benefiting, they're spending their money and they're directly benefiting from that organisation in different ways. And you could think through, you know, what are the outputs? So they turn up on a course, they turn up at an event, they turn up at a workshop, and then what are the outcomes? You know, how do they feel? What do they do? What do they learn? And it sort of rolls on from there. So the direct customers and the direct beneficiaries in this case are similar characters, as you'll see, which isn't always the case in a social enterprise. Sometimes social enterprises' customers are quite different to the beneficiaries, and that's often in a case where there might be high levels of poverty, or something might be quite innovative and new, or it's not yet got a market, or there'll never be a market that can financially pay for what it is that needs delivering in that area. But people find different business models to make sure that those services, those amenities, or those activities can run. So in terms of Down syndrome, you know, direct beneficiaries, as well as the customers, you know, are the dancers that attend the classes, other schools and educators whose, you know, children and young people that may or may not have disabilities are now going to these classes. The confidence is getting boosted. They're more confident in school. They might be looking at taking and doing very well in creative, performing arts, dance, or other lessons now as a result. And different trainees that are doing these courses will benefit. There's people attending conferences and events, so they're benefiting from enjoying, you know, what they're experiencing, meeting new people, having access to arts, culture, and performance, and other businesses and their employees are benefiting potentially from their colleagues having gone on diversity and inclusion programs and coming back, and the ripple effect of that in terms of people being more aware, more inclusive in terms of their thinking around, you know, how they design the way that they run their businesses, the way that they recruit, and those sorts of things. Indirectly, in this case, you know, there's all sorts, you know, the families benefit, wider business and community benefits, colleges and universities benefit potentially from more people going into different kinds of courses that link back to some of the learning that they might have had as a result of Down syndrome. And, you know, other colleagues and customers of the businesses that go on diversity and inclusion courses might benefit. And so on and so on. I'm sure you've had a good read through some of these things, but in place of war, you know, its customers are different to its beneficiaries. It's working in war-torn areas. And so it's the likes of the University of Manchester, the Arts Council, Sainsbury's Foundation, British Council, who've invested in the programmes of work that they deliver in the UK and overseas, the creative entrepreneurship programmes that they run, the festivals, the performing arts initiatives and capacity building of artists in war-torn areas to help them create new forms of inspiration, aspiration and enterprise in those areas. The products and services, they do a lot of research and policy work, they do, you know, global creative enterprise programs, and there's a lot of conflict resolution training that goes alongside what they do to help people in war-torn countries improve and regenerate their areas and boost and develop artists and musicians and performers to be able to keep going well beyond their interventions and their programs. And they can fast track people into the creative arts industry or the music industry to be selling, doing, training, applying for resources to capacity build their own countries. So people aren't coming in from outside. And there's potentially, you know, NGOs locally and you know, nationally and globally who benefit from this, you know, impetus that they create when they go into countries and help create energy, skills, talent, and nurture positive futures. Indirectly, economic development and conflict resolution departments benefit. They work a lot with large corporate brands, be it, you know, big shoe manufacturer, you know, Nike and, you know, those sorts of organisations, Coca-Cola, music labels, all sorts, clothing brands get behind some of the festivals and some of the campaigns that they do, partly to get into the back and beyond and different countries from a standing start, but also as part of their CSR, corporate social responsibility, to invest in some of these places. And clearly the children, the families of the artists and performers who are developing themselves, developing their ideas, their businesses and their futures benefit as a result of what's going on here. Shiverpool, as I mentioned before, they deliver cultural heritage tours. Some of those are to the public, some of those are to businesses for away days or for, functions and, corporate events. And they also sell merchandise. So there's a range of direct, I won't go through all this, but you can see there's a range of direct customers, direct beneficiaries and indirect. And likewise with MetMunch, they do training and development. Some of that's in curriculum with Manchester Met Uni. Some of that's more broadly for different organisations around nutrition, around diversity, around food sustainability and the environment. And they do all sorts of creative exhibitions. They've done cookbooks, creative tools and resources. They've got these amazing bags with images of food on where students have been able to develop their talents, creating this amazing artwork to go on products, and they can then use a QR code to learn all about beetroots or all about mushrooms and get recipes from nowhere or seemingly nowhere, and they're really bringing creative, digital and everyday food, environment and sustainability goals to life through what they do. Different direct customers for them, the university, museums, different people buying catering from them, and other organisations that get involved in some of the activities that they do. Likewise, similar people, benefit as a result, and the wider beneficiaries, link back to those direct and indirect beneficiaries, as you can see. So hopefully that's given you a flavour for, some of the kinds of businesses that operate in this space, how they might have different business models with different kinds of products and services, and some of the different audiences that they reach out to, and who benefits directly, who benefits indirectly, and who's actually paying for this stuff. Because these are all the stakeholders. We're talking about mapping the stakeholders. This is who they are. Who's got a vested interest? Who's benefiting is the ultimate beneficiary. Who's paying for this stuff clearly is a beneficiary because they're choosing to purchase and part with cash or whatever the resources are to make this thing happen. And then there's the wider ripple effect of different kinds of indirect beneficiaries. So I put that out there as a kind of a way of thinking of different people that get involved with the way these businesses work, or these organisations, these community groups operate, so that you can start to think about who cares, who's involved, who's benefiting, who's valuing, who's got something to say about what we do. And these are the kinds of characters. And you will have a set of these for your own organisation. So, who do you need to engage with to measure your impact and value? And I would say you need to engage with a combination. You need to talk to or be involved with or get information and feedback from a combination of direct, indirect and wider stakeholders. There aren't, never-ending amounts of time. There's only so many hours in the day. So when you start doing this stuff, you have to think about, what's your capacity, knowledge and skills? How much time have you got to throw at this? And what's the budget? Have you got any budget to throw at this? Or is it all fag packet? Or are you going to bring someone in to do this, to create, some form of external support and some additional legitimacy? So it's not just you saying, oh yeah, we did all this stuff, we're marvellous, these people think we're great, here you go. It's bringing in external brains, external people who've got nothing to do with you really, to really independently evaluate what you do, take the stress and the time and the worry about how you go about this stuff, and bring in the experts who know what they're doing to do this stuff. And there comes a point either in your development or as a result of certain types of funding, or because actually you thought, you know what, I'm better off doing this, I'll bring you in for that. It's horses for courses, as I've said before. When you start off, you have to do it all yourself, or you have to find neat, tidy and simple ways of doing this stuff to get started. But as you evolve, you might choose to bring someone in for a number of days to evaluate what you do, or 3 to 5 years down the line, you might have somebody come and do a 5-year review of what's going on. So you've got some really thorough, robust and independent data that says, you know, what value you create for your community or for society. So something to think about. Thinking about the ratios of who you involved. You know, are you talking to your, you know, people who are turning up day in, day out, who love you, think you're amazing? Are you talking to those kind of, or those people who kind of, they think you're all right, but they won't quite fund you yet, and they're like, what is it these guys do? Are you asking the parents of, the carers of, the siblings of? Are you asking, you know, wider local businesses who sit around and operate around what it is you do? Who needs to have a say here? Who's got interesting data that demonstrates that you're having an impact? And I would say it's not just about asking who you know and going for the easy pickings and champions. It's about thinking about who could the saboteurs be here? Who could make or break your business or your organisation? Who's not just got great things to say, but could teach you something about how to improve? And who could you build a relationship with further by inviting them to give their opinion, you know, that would lead to further business development opportunities down the line. So you can be quite strategic with this. People don't realise you can use social value measurement as a business development tool, and that's what I would do if I were you. If you're going to bother, you're going to take the time, make it have some sort of return. So the other thing to think about, yes, you can work out what people value about what you do, who cares, what they have to say about it. But in addition to understanding what they value and what you said in the public purse, well, you're asking them a handful of questions about that. You might as well be asking them a handful of other questions for market research purposes. So you get two bites at the cherry when you go kill two birds with one stone and do some social value measurement and some market intelligence gathering, and it all creates some great data for you to then use to improve what you do, improve your services, evidence-base what you're doing, and use that for a whole range of purposes. So just coming back to Down syndrome, who we mentioned before, this is an example here looking at who you're going to talk to, why, who you're going to talk to, what you're going to ask them, how you're going to go about it. And this could be for anyone and anything. It's just a quick example of how you might design a quick evaluation, social value impact measurement project exercise with your direct, indirect, and wider stakeholders, so that you've got something to start with. Because what I will say is, the first time you do this, it's just it's a pilot, it's a dummy run. These guys are guinea pigs to you, working out what the hell it is you think you do, and what you think people appreciate and value and want from you, and what you're missing or what you're not doing. More often than not, this is a really cathartic exercise that really helps you. You think you know what you're doing, and you get your feedback all the time from these people. So you know what you're doing. You know everyone thinks you're marvelous. You know you do a good job. You know you've helped these people back into work. You know you've got these young people off the streets and getting them doing, you know, exciting things. You know, whatever it is you think you're doing, there's a whole heap of amazing other stuff that you're doing that you've not heard yet, because you've not asked the right questions. And so it's really worth doing this. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You don't have to get anyone else in. You just have to start. So here's an example of how it works. You make sure that you get a few direct, indirect, and wider. You don't do one hit wonder. You don't just talk to the people that turn up for the course, because you miss the trick, you know, or you don't just talk to people that turn up for an event. You know, you think about, what are we doing? Who's engaging with these different things, and what are we, you know, what do we need to, you know, who do we need to ask what and in what way? How will they best respond? How can we get them to answer some questions? And you create that for them. So directly, these guys have got the dancers, they've got people coming to events, they've got businesses, they've got staff, volunteers and board. Do not forget that your staff, volunteers and your board, or whoever your management committee or anyone else is, they are direct stakeholders as well. They're doing this for a reason. They're working for you for a reason. They're influencing, shaping, doing your books, or, you know, whatever it might be, serving up tea, for a reason, and why? What do they value from this? What are they getting out of it? How is it changing their lives? Why does it make the world a better place for them? And you just ask them, or get someone to ask them, whether it's you, an independent person, or a paid expert. You need to ask them why they're coming and what they're benefiting from this. Same goes for indirect. So there's families of those people that get involved. How are they noticing that their siblings, their sons, daughters, wives, husbands, family members are benefiting from this? Other, employees and managers are those coming along, teachers, the police, future employers I put here. It's a bit of a hard one to ask, but there's ways of spotting ripple effects. You'll know if you've worked with somebody and they've gone on to something better, and a business or a course or something's benefited as a result. What is it about the way you work with those individuals, or what is it about how they've now been able to attract different, more diverse, or more rounded and readily available talent for their thing as a result of what you've done with them, that they could tell you the story about them and their observations around what they've noticed with these, whoever, young people, old people, people from diverse communities, ex-offenders, school children, anyone you're all working with different people. What is it you're doing with them that's changing and that's having an impact and that ripple effect? And what can you ask people about that? And this is what this is about. The indirect really starts to nudge in to that ripple effect and find out what's really happening as a result. And the wider groups, local cafes and businesses in this case, around the venues where, if they're putting on performances, and they're doing it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or whatever it might be. And granted, through COVID, clearly things are a bit different, but even still putting, I'm going to a car pantomime at Christmas, all being well, so I'm going to be buying my snacks, getting in the car, getting some petrol, driving to the AJ Bell Stadium, on the outskirts of sort of Salford and Manchester, watching my Horrible Histories Christmas pantomime with the kids and all. We spent money, we're doing things, we're valuing that experience. And the local businesses that we've bothered to spend money with, the petrol station and the popcorn seller and the wine gum seller, whatever it is, you track these people down and you work out where's the pattern here. Are we creating a local impact? Are local businesses benefiting from what we're doing because we exist? A quick example of that you'll see later, Levenshulme Market. Couldn't believe it. I did their social value report the other year after they've been going 5 years, and I wouldn't have believed in a million years that as a result of Levenshulme Market, which I helped the people who originally set that up to take the plunge and give it a go and do the focus groups and make it happen. 5 years on, rightly or wrongly, depending on people's views, house prices are going up in part as a result of Levenshulme Market. Shock horror, I wouldn't have pictured that in a million years at the time, but I've sat with estate agents in Levenshulme. This is what you have to do, dig deep, peel back the layers of the onion and find out what people say and what's happening. And for some people, that's a nightmare. You don't want house prices going up, but for other people, that's a real benefit. And certainly for people who thought they could, wanted to go to live in Didsbury or wanted to go and live in Chorlton and whatever leafy parts of whatever suburbs, and can't quite get there. But in reality, Levenshulme's got all these great attributes, this great market, the atmosphere is fantastic. They can feel happy and secure and, live in, get the house of their dreams for the time being or for whenever, and benefit from the market. And physically, between the estate agents and standing on that market in the rain and questioning people, who are you, why are you here, and tell me how you benefit from the market, tell me what you think. I'm hearing young couples, older people, all sorts of people telling me on more than one occasion that they moved to Levenshulme and part of the reasoning was the market, or they're looking at houses in Levenshulme now because of the market. So until you start asking these questions and talking to people, you just don't know what the ripple effect is and what you're doing. I digress. But point being, the wider ripple effect is quite astonishing, and you can look at it from a local, that LN3, the local perspective, or you can look at it from a wider perspective. So here it starts to get into the realms of, for Down syndrome anyway, arts and cultural development agencies all start to get a bit more strategic, a bit more policy. So arts and cultural development agencies and council departments that link to this stuff, leisure and tourism, creative culture, disability awareness organisations will be benefiting as a result of Down syndrome existing, having that presence, creating new talent, having new examples of who's doing what and who's getting employed and who's, they turn over £200,000 now, this organisation. So it's moving forward and it's creating impact in both the arts, culture and disability awareness area or arena. And likewise with diversity inclusion, I put diversity and inclusion strategic leads. So there's people chomping at the bit to try and understand how on earth you can recruit from a much more diverse audience. They're missing out on those kinds of talent. There's people who aren't working, who could be working, down to skills, down to belief, down to physical barriers in getting to work. And if they can better understand this, and they can value Down syndrome for telling them how to do it better, what they could do differently, and so forth, the ripple effect ripples on again. So many ways that you could be questioning who you're working with. Just push the envelope, tip it over, figure out. So many social entrepreneurs set up because they want to act as a force for social change, and often they're busy figuring their ideas out, finding the cash to try and make this stuff work, juggling staff, volunteers and everywhere else. But this is actually quite a fun thing because it reminds you what you're doing this for, and it helps you get a regained sense of vision and clarity, and a pat on the back usually when you start asking people what it is that you're doing and what difference it's making for them. So I highly recommend it. So those are the kind of the who you might ask. Clearly, I'm sure you've read, as I've been prattling on, the ways that you engage people. And there's different ways. I'm not going to go through those because we're going to summarise this shortly. But these questions, I am going to set one just so that it is clear. And it takes the rocket science out of this stuff. You might think that you have to go on a million courses, you've got to pay somebody hundreds of thousands of pounds to do this stuff. You've got a handful of questions. It's as simple as that. With your certainly with your direct and your indirect beneficiaries, all you need to ask them in some of these methods, it might be other things you want to ask, but in order to work out what's the social value of what you do and how do you start to distill what's the priority, what do people really value, how are you making a difference, and how could you then consistently measure what they call key value indicators, key areas of impact. What are your key areas of impact that people value you for, they recognize you for, they talk about you for? You've got bulk evidence, bulk data showing that you make a difference in these areas. And so that's where the funders and the investors should be throwing their money at, because you're delivering their outcomes, you're creating the value, you're doing what people need. This is what this is all about. And all you need to ask them, what do you get involved with? So when you come to Down syndrome, how did you hear about us? How did you hear about Down syndrome? What is it you get involved with? How do they engage with you? How do they get involved? You're then going to move on to thinking about, describe what's been of most value to you. How is Down syndrome of value to you? What do you enjoy most? What's important? What do you gain from being involved? What do you gain from coming to Down syndrome? And then after you've listened to all sorts of tales there, and you can probe and delve and find out a bit more, how have things changed or improved for you as a result? Or you or your daughter or your son or your family member, your employee, your business, how have things changed or improved as a result for your community, you know, slot in the keywords as you see fit. But that's it. 4 questions is all you need to ask. Magic. We'll come back to what you do with that in a minute, but that's all you ask. And I would say, if you know, to make it somewhat robust, and it, you know, takes some time and it can take some investment if you can't do it yourself. And I'd suggest, because I get paid to do this stuff, but I'd suggest that you do pay external people to save you time, ask better questions, to be impartial and to create legitimacy. I'd always say, if you can get someone else to do it, do that. If you can't, get a staff member, volunteer, do it yourself if you have to. But ask these questions and see what they say. And across 8 to 12 people that you might cherry pick, a handful of direct beneficiaries that have got a good story to tell, or an interesting story to tell, or overcoming a challenge story to tell, or big ripple effect story to tell. Likewise, a couple of indirect beneficiaries and a handful of wider beneficiaries. And through this, not only do you get to sort of listen to, boost the confidence of, and hear ideas and improvements and great tales from the people that you already benefit, you get to hear it from the wider net, the families, the employers, the schools, the teachers, the wider community, but also your investors, people who might have backed you, funded you, are on the brink of it, but they're not sure. They know they value you, but you need to find out what, why, how. Use it as a business development opportunity, and you know, 6 to 12 people, get those interviews done, or whatever the form is, you know. And you might have existing data, you know, so as much as getting those interviews done is really helpful, because it gives you an intensive hit from individuals, it gives you some key information, new information, testimonials, impact case studies, whatever you want to box them up as. It gives you some solid new information that you wouldn't have otherwise had. There's, you know, it might be that you have application forms, or it might be that you do one-to-ones with people and write notes and reports on an ongoing basis. It might be that you have a bit of an evaluation. It might be duff, frankly. Most of the people that I work with and go and have a look at, a big part of what I do with them is looking at how to improve their evaluation forms, because usually they're asking all the wrong questions, and it tells them nothing about what the value is that they create. Just tells them tick boxes. It doesn't tell them what's changing as a result. But anyway, hopefully I'm drumming that into you. But all of these methods here are all ways of gathering data that you or somebody else can analyze to create social value data for you. So bear that in mind and think about the different methods that you have at your disposal, that you're already doing now, or that you could create simply using some of these questions here and using some additional questions. Like I say, if you want to do a bit of additional market intelligence, market research, or there's something else key to the way you work, to the community you live in, or, you know, something thematic that you have to ask that will be helpful for you to gather data on. I'm nearly there, don't panic. So just wrapping it up in a couple of ways here. So what it looks like when it's done well. You've seen some of these methods on the previous slides, but when it's done well, you know your audience, you know your budget, and you use this with techniques that are going to work. You've done some thorough stakeholder mapping, and you're going to learn what it is they value using those 4 questions and some wider questions. Oh, I've just realised, missed a bit. I talked about those 4 questions, direction and with a wider world. I should have said, these guys you've got hold of, you've probably eyeballed them and you know what they look like, and you know roughly what might be of benefit to them, but you ask them some questions and it digs a bit deeper. These wider beneficiaries you may never have met, you might like to meet, or you might be struggling to get them to engage with you, or yeah, they might have given you some cash and you know they're on your back trying to work out what it is you've done. But you're wanting to ask them again what they value about what they do, you know, what's been positive about the impacts they've observed, and you know how you compare. But you're also looking at working out with them some wider strategic information. So even if you can't meet these guys, you know, you can go and look up, or Dance Syndrome can go and look up, you know, what the Arts Council are saying about dance, and the importance of dance as a form of whatever, learning and development, as a form of well-being, as a form of self-expression for people, whatever it might be. There's also other wider annual reports of other organisations that might be talking about the benefits of this sort of thing in terms of health and well-being. There might be what the commissioners, so what your health commissioners, your cultural commissioners, your educational commissioners, what are they saying about the priorities of what it is you do? So you can gather that information and it forms part of what the story that you tell. So sorry, I've jumped back there, but it comes back in that, there's doing stakeholder measurement directly to learn what people want and focusing on what they value. And as I say, eventually you come up with these key value indicators. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. The techniques, I started to talk about some, but interviews, surveys, focus groups, reviewing existing research. So that could be previous evaluation forms. And my question mark here, an exclamation mark, is on, are they any good? Because a lot of them are a load of rubbish. But that's just my observation, that they tell you some stuff, they tell you who turned up, they give you outputs and they give you some outcomes, but they rarely give you impact, and they rarely, or if not never, give you value. So just think about the questions that you're asking and think about what surprised people, what are people doing differently 1 year on, 2 years on, 10 years on. Not that anybody ever puts the value, the time or the attention into tracking that, but you might need to, especially if you work in education. What is the value that you do, and what's the longitudinal value, and have you got the research and the evaluation in place to look at that? This research and evaluation of existing stuff also takes you back to that strategic stuff I just backtracked on. So existing reports, existing strategic documents, frameworks, objectives, strategies, all of these documents that certain agencies or local economic departments or arts and cultural development departments or environmental departments, there's a whole ream of policy documents out there linked to the sector that you work in that tell you why what you do is of value. So even if you haven't got time to lift a finger or ask a single question, there's a whole bundle of strategic documents out there that's already backing up the reason for why people should invest in what you do. So go dig them out. I talked about outcome stars earlier on, this kind of light touch, easy way. You get this kind of star-shaped diagram on a scale of 0 to 5. How do you feel about this at the start and at the end? And it gives you a journey travelled. It's very, very accessible way of tracking evidence and impact. Or you build on that to look at the WhenWebs. Look up WhenWebs, particularly if you're in with health and mental health, to look at whether that's a tool that you could use to evidence base, benefit from and value from what you do. Videos, even if some organisations are videoing people left, right, and centre, and if you've got heaps of videos or podcasts or stuff that you've created, there's a good chance the questions you've asked them are the questions you should be asking in the social value measurement exercise. Who are they? How do they engage with what you do? What do they value about what you do? How have they benefited? What do they enjoy? What's changing for them? What are they doing next? What are they doing now? This is all social value data. Look it up, write it down, analyse it, see what patterns and what trends, what's repeating. That's basically what to give you your social value indicators. The analysis and the community, is the key part of it. Creating stats off the back of what people are saying, benchmarking, like with the outcome stars, these jumps between where they were when they started and where they were 6 months or a year or however long down the line. Quotes and testimonials, impact case studies, as I call them. Evidencing costs. Now, I'm not going to go into heaps of this, but there's various tools out there to help you measure the cost of things. You might be something you never even want to get involved with. And so you can bring in an expert to help you with that. But if you're not got the money, you haven't got the time, or you're just too tight, which is fine, there's something called the cost unit database. It's a little bit out of date now, but these things evolve. And there's ways of understanding if you're saving people from taking antidepressants, going and having hospital stays, you're keeping young people out of a CAMS system, you're keeping kids out of care, you are reducing antisocial behaviour, basically saving the public purse. There's financial proxies, as they're called, that, you know, unit costs of what these things cost, you know, and you can calculate them up, and that's what social return on investment is. So evidence in the cost is the icing on the cake after you've kind of looked at what it is you're doing, how you might be saving the public purse. And I've already talked about links to policy priorities, which certainly for funding bids and for large scale funding bids, or for commissioning and pitching, this is the stuff that you need to communicate what it is you do and to stand out above competition. I've just highlighted here all the stuff in Lilac. Technically, you've got the time, you've got the inclination, you've got the capacity and the, you know, crack on. But if you need some additional hands on deck, independent people like me and colleagues of mine and other people I know across the UK do this for a living. They can train people in how to do it better themselves, save themselves some money. They can go and physically do the stakeholder engagement work or facilitate focus groups, everybody's cup of tea, convening a focus group and organising group dynamics and listening to the, you know, stuff that comes out. So, and you might want to stay out of that and let people just say what they need to say. Producing reports, you know, accessing the cost analysis, you know, cost unit database and data, financial proxies that calculates what things potentially cost, and how you're saving cash for the government, for your local authorities, for funders or for anyone else. That, as I've already said, independence creates legitimacy and creates a level of robustness beyond your original staff team, potentially. So it's something to think about, but ultimately it isn't rocket science, so don't let anybody tell you that it is. And this is just an example of what it can look like when it's done well, and when you perhaps need to buy in the experts or somebody else to help you with this. Just, it's, you know, there's another workshop in itself, and we've got some good podcasts on this, on physically communicating, because the communication bit is the marketing and the PR and the shiny front thing, you know, the pictures, the videos, the content, the social media. It's what you do with this information afterwards. But I would say, call me boring, but, you know, this content that you've created here, it's going in funding bids, it's going in proposals, it's being used to improve your pitches and your presentations, it's being used to improve your website and your marketing materials. And yes, you might chunk bits up to go on social media and other marketing bits, but ultimately you need to turn this data into new cash and new income and new resources to help sustain what you do. That's what I help people to do. And you probably can't see this very well in the slide, but just two quick examples here that you can Google at your leisure, and I'll tell you how. I did a social value report for Levenshulme Market, as I mentioned, 5 years on. Let's see if we can zoom in and you'll see what this actually says. So what we helped Levenshulme Market do here was understand the impact they were having with local residents and local businesses, with people that come to the market, you know, people that benefit from the atmosphere and the additional amenities and other stuff, and the interaction with local people and people that they knew, people they didn't know, but also the local traders and what they got. So we were able to go through and really, you'll see some figures and stats and percentages. I won't bore you with it. You can, if you Google Levenshulme Market social impact report or social value report, it's all there, all 30 pages of it. It's quite in depth, but it helps you, you know, they made a series of commitments, the social value pledge that got mentioned right at the beginning. You know, it helped Levenshulme Market recognise the value that they were having and what they were prepared to commit to going forward. So it helped them strategically think through what they were doing next, and really get, you really get your organisation by the balls here and go, this is exactly who we are, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to communicate this so that we hold ourselves to account. This is what this does. So Levenshulme Market's commitment and intention to offer jobs to local people wherever possible. And there's some stats there on how they're creating jobs and investing in local people. Talked about the staff and how much money they were investing in local people each year. £30,000 each year was going in local people. Levenshulme Market commits to support and provide opportunities to improve the economic outlook for local people. So this was broader around training and skills development and around the market traders and various other things. They'd done an enterprise programme, kickstart funds. So there was all sorts in there for that. Levenshulme Market provides a platform to enable ventures to grow and become sustainable. So this was all about being like a test bed for small to medium enterprises, or even, you know, startups, to get businesses going. And there's a whole bunch of stats around that. You know, invest in local entrepreneurs and businesses. It provides a platform for people to increase and promote environmentally responsive activities. They've got quite a social and environmental ethos. And this was the biggest thing, actually, you know, positive atmosphere and the community pride, and where the community can meet and connect. So even you could be waffling and making it up and not knowing what it is you're trying to do, what you're trying to say. Social value measurement gives you the language you need to communicate to your audience, your stakeholders, your customers. They're the ones who tell you what they need to hear in order to buy into it. So when you ask them what they value, what they're enjoying, the minute you listen to how they tell you what you do, it just automatically gives you the language you need to mirror back. And that's what this was able to achieve. And off the back of that, they were able to go to the local council and further promote what they were doing, started applying to some larger funders, started to market themselves slightly differently, started to realise that some of the gaps or some of the pitfalls, some of the things that weren't working quite so well, and address some of that. So that's just an example. It was pretty involved, pretty thorough, and there was a mixture of market research, kind of trader market research and feedback, and the wider social value stuff in that. So it was quite a big, hefty project. Just coming on to Horseherd, completely different. So whereas with Levenshulme Market, they're not working with ex-offenders, they're not working with veterans, they're not working with young people, it's the general public. So there's all sorts of key value indicators around building community pride, regenerating the local area, spending local, buying social, having an environmental impact. So there was, you know, clearly, you know, creating jobs and economic impact. There was all of that. But with Horseherd, it was slightly different. And any business that's got much more of a health and well-being focus, there's always a lot more to go at on the financial proxies in terms of measuring what you're saving the public purse. I suppose what I'm saying is Levenshulme Market aren't saving the public purse particularly. They may a little bit here and there, but that doesn't matter because they have all sorts of other impacts on regeneration and environment and social capital and community involvement. So there's, you know, but with Horseherd, because they work with people in a particular way, it's kind of coaching and what they call equine facilitated learning. It's fascinating. I absolutely love what they do. And they work with children and young people, kids at risk of all sorts of different things going on in their lives, and veterans in particular. A lot of people who face trauma in different ways, and they help them understand and improve and feel part of themselves and part of society again. You know, we were able to help them find the language a little better to describe what they do, because it's, you know, it's hard. You know, so we've got here, you know, by unlocking the potential of people who have an experience of trauma, personal difficulties, or who struggle to manage their emotions and behaviour, Horseherd has unique and effective methods to enable people who were previously writing themselves off or being underestimated by others to fulfil meaningful lives. So it starts to create a language to, you know, that's a couple of very long sentences there with could be better grammar, I appreciate, but it starts to create this waffle that you need for funding bids or for marketing or for anything else. And, you know, they've been using that in their websites and in funding bids and various other things. The other thing it did in doing that full 360-degree stakeholder engagement, where we talk to veterans, we talk to young people, we talk to the carers of veterans, we talk to the teachers of young people, families and parents, grandparents, people that run the stables where the horses are, looking at what the local economic situation and improvements were, what the well-being improvements, education improvements, looked at it all. It helped work out where are the key areas of value for this organisation, and we came up with 4 key value indicators for them. So there was a key value indicator around healthier and emotionally resilient communities. That's stood up as something they were clearly doing. They're creating independent and active citizens with increased capability and increased sense of personal responsibility. They were also, helping people improve their skills, aspirations, and their ability to transition towards positive futures, and helping people improve their lifestyle and their life chances and opportunities. And you could pick those out of the air and use them for yourself, but I think when you analyse your own organisation and hone in on what it is exactly that you do, it helps you really focus in on the quality of what you do and measuring back against what you do and thinking what to say yes and no to, or what to go for, what not to go for, and who to partner with and who not to partner with. So there's a whole reasoning for why you bother to do this stuff. And last but not least, before I let you go, impact case studies. As much as you can come up with number crunching exercises here with Levenshulme Market around, what data and what stats and what cash is saving the public purse from various things. As much as you can come up with more clever rationale for how you articulate what you do, how you measure what you do, who you choose to communicate that with and partner with everything else. Often it's the testimonials and the impact case studies, but doing them in a way that doesn't just say, oh, and they had a nice time, or this lovely person, developed themselves. So what? What does that tell a commissioner? How do their ears are only going to prick up at certain things. So here, this guy in the picture, Jamie, Jamie came across Horseherd through a local veteran support group. So ears prick up, working with veterans. Although he's now been out of the armed forces for 40 years, he still suffers with trauma and mental health issues. So they're working with people who are clearly, in need, have got additional needs, and potentially unemployed, out of work, and are needing additional health, well-being, and other social services, as a result of their situation. Sadly, this has resulted in multiple suicide attempts and has affected his relationships, quality of life, sense of identity and belonging. This is only a chunk of the case study because I couldn't fit it all on, and there's heaps more in the report if you want to look, and there's another 4 case studies of other people, of Brian and Paul and various other people who benefited from this. But he's saying, Jamie said, the program blew me away. I didn't realize horses were that intuitive and able to read and respond to human behavior. So it's trying to help people understand what is this thing and how does it benefit you. You can see that you can see and tell that they can feel your emotions, energy and anger levels. I can't tell you the science, but it works. And if there was more space on this page, I'd be able to tell you that, as a result of Horseherd, Jamie is now in more secure housing. He's previously in quite insecure housing. He's now organised himself, he's set himself some goals, and he was in a much more secure housing situation. He was much less isolated. He'd had a sort of family relationship breakdowns with his sons and daughters and various things throughout his life, and he'd now got almost like a surrogate family who new grandkids and a new son and daughter-in-law for him to feel part of the community, feel part of the family again. And this had then boosted him on to getting involved in various other things, and he was now interested in going doing further volunteering and other work for Horseherd to motivate other veterans in future. So these sorts of stories, case studies, the ripple effect of what happens as a result is ultimately what's going to help you understand what the value of what you do is and communicate that with the various audiences that we've already talked about. So it just gives you a flavour for how different businesses communicate this data once they get their hands on it and what they can do with it. Horseherd, have gone on to use this data to, apply for awards, to apply for funds, and to start to pitch for work with, other hospitals, mental health units, and with veterans organisations. So it helps them build on what they're doing. So I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been useful and interesting to give you that whistle-stop tour. If you've got questions, thoughts and comments, you can get in touch with us through these methods. And I'd say take yourself back, start from the very beginning and have a good old look through, where you're at in doing this in your own organisation. What do you think you're doing well? What do you need to improve on? And hopefully the tips through the workshop here will help you build on that and think about what you can do for yourself, where you might need to bring in other people, and get your building blocks in place for measuring your social value and starting to communicate that better. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope that the rest of your day goes great. Bye for now.